Hello, everybody, and welcome to another PureDriven podcast. I am once again joined with Christopher Swanson, the CEO of PureDriven. How are you doing today, Chris?
Well, good morning, Steve. It's a beautiful day, and I'm doing great.
It is a beautiful day. It's a bit chilly, though. The grass is actually looking a little white out there, if you can believe it, and it's only, the end of September? Crazy.
Yeah, this time of year, actually fall is my favorite time of year.
It is my favorite as well.
Yeah.
And my wife's, she loves it too. She says anyone that doesn't love fall is stupid.
That's
direct quote.
An amazing statement from a lady from Southern California.
Yes.
I didn't know they had fall there.
Yep.
That's great.
She loves fall. She always invites her parents up here for fall. So today we're going to talk about geofencing. And we're really going to talk about how it relates to multi-location or franchise businesses. But in general, we just kind of want to do a quick run through of what geofencing is in general for anybody that wants to know.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. It's geofencing is something that's been talked about for a long time. A kind of a technology option that in theory sounds amazing. And I hope today we'll be able to talk a little bit about some of the positives and maybe some of the drawbacks to geofencing.
Yeah.
Because it really is something that people think does something, and really often it does something else. And so we like to kind of explain that here on this podcast.
Yep, definitely. I think one thing that people mix up with geofencing a lot is they just assume that anything that's targeting an area is considered geofencing. But it's a lot different than that. It's actually a very specific way of targeting an area. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, it is. And so basically, the best way I've been able to simplify this after talking about it for years and working with it for years is if you're familiar with a map or a Google map, and if you could just take a look at that and then you could draw a circle around where you wanted that advertising to go, that's geofencing. And geo-targeted is a different terminology that's used targeting that geographical area. So fence, kind of think of it like a fence. You're drawing that fence around that area on the map, saying, I want anybody that goes into this physical area to see an advertisement.
Yep, and I like to think of it as a fence in two ways. I like to think of it as when you're just targeting an area, it's like a wooden fence. If someone climbs over the fence, then they can receive ads. But with geofencing, it's like an electric fence. If they touch the fence, they get shocked because they get the ad. Is that right? It's a little bit more intrusive as far as it pushes to them rather than they have to go find it on, say, a social media platform.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, and exactly that's really what happens is it's pushing to them is the best way I like that to describe it. And so when I say pushing to, what does that mean? Well, that means that if they've given permission, and that's a really important thing to remember, if they've given permission,
yep.
Then basically that ad can show up, and it shows up in a way where it's just sent to them, right, automatically. So it's like triggering, it's like a light switch. You flick the light switch on, and then boom, the ad's going to come out.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that we've talked to a few experts in the field and a few of the people that have actually developed some of these solutions for geofencing. And they do say that when you're looking at Android and Apple devices, there is a bit of a difference as to how those get on there. Is that correct?
There is, yes. Obviously, most of the geofencing is going to be done through a mobile device. And most of those mobile devices are going to be phones, iPhone, Android. So yes, it's a little different. Both of those phone manufacturers within their operating systems have to allow, they don't have to allow, but they do allow.
Yep.
But it's different, obviously, based on each one of those because they're different operating systems. And so yes, the push notification again is going to be an opt-in, and it's going to be different based on what mobile device they're looking at.
Definitely. And then actually that reminded me, we did talk to a beacon technology expert, and he was telling us that with their specific technology, it's 91% push to mobile and 9% push to a tablet. So that's just kind of a stat to throw out there. It's only one company, but it's probably decently relevant to the whole industry.
Right, and that speaks, I think, to the fact that, again, most people, if you look, say they're going through an airport, they might have their iPad or their tablet out because they're doing business where they need a larger screen. But for the most part, what people you're going to see 80-90% of the time, it's going to be that mobile device, that phone that they use, the texting and everything else.
Yeah, definitely. So while I have you here, could you just kind of walk us through what a geofencing campaign would look like from, let's say, a retail location. Let's just say someone that sells clothes. What would the initial setup look like for them, and what would it actually do for the customer?
Yeah, so the most common, and this is very, very common, is that it requires you to opt in. So often what will happen is, even if it's a push notification where it sends to your text, it's going to require that you're willing to now accept and be part of that. But most often, what you're going to see is that the individual has to download an app onto their device. So if you're a clothing retailer and say you're in a mall, okay, and you want to geofence that mall. So you look at your map, you draw the circle around that, you say, that's where I want to see the advertisements go, because maybe we're selling teens clothes and there's all these teens in the mall. Seems simple. You draw the circle, they're going to walk into that area with their mobile device, and now an ad's going to be shown to them. But it's not that simple. They have to opt in, and they have to be willing to say, yep, and that opt-in can come through the form of an app that gets downloaded onto their phone, maybe for your retailer, or in the event, like say a concert. It might be for that particular concert or that venue. So you download the app because you want information, maybe how to get around the venue or whatever it might be.
Yep.
And now you've given permission when you check that box that says, hey, I can now be part of this geofenced area. The problem with that, if you understand it, is it becomes very complicated to get a significant amount of impressions unless you're in a popular app or you're in a situation where you have a lot of traffic.
Yep.
So that means if you can't get impressions, eyeballs on the screen is always what I call impressions.
Yep.
Then you got a problem. And the problem is that I'm not going to get that much engagement necessarily. And we always look as marketers to the fact of, okay, am I hitting the demographic, the audience? Is that right? And with digital, of course, and social, we can get far more targeted and make sure we're hitting the right audience. But the bigger issue is can I get enough volume that this is actually good for ROI? Because often, even if I'm hitting the audience, the demographic, it might not be the people that are really interested. And so that's been one of the problems we've seen with geofencing is the inability to generate enough impressions to get enough engagement for the investment, the ROI that the store or corporation or brand is making to get that engagement.
Yeah, and to touch on that, one thing I want to say is with geofencing, it's the way you pay for it is a little different than other digital mediums for the most part. So for Snapchat, for instance, when you look at the geofencing on the filters, you actually pay for the area that you want to geofence in and for the amount of time. You don't pay based on impressions. So if you do a huge area and there's no one in it, you theoretically could pay $2,000 a month for an area that no one walks into.
Right, and I'm glad you're bringing this up because that's what started happening is the models out there started realizing, wait, we can't get enough impressions. But a company like Snapchat, they've got millions and millions of users.
Yep.
So they should have the ability. But how many people are actually on Snapchat walking through that area that fit that demographic, and they have to open the Snapchat, which they probably would, to see that. So Snapchat said, wait a second, we got to make money. Our whole model is going public and making money on stock, which is the model of all these big companies. So how can we do that in a way where we can show the stockholders revenue or potential stockholders revenue?
Yep.
And they said, well, we got to change the model a little bit. We're going to charge you basically to own that area for this time frame, right? And if somebody walks in and they hit the certain demographic and all these other things that you've set up, then great, they're going to see the ad.
Yep.
But the problem is, again, you might be in an area, like you just mentioned, that doesn't have that much volume. And you might not be able to get, the amount of traffic that you want. Snapchat is probably the biggest one out there that's doing geofencing as the back structure of their advertising. So we've had a tremendous amount of success with Snapchat. Don't get me wrong.
Yep.
But you have to understand how it works and what your ROI can look like. Because I know, Steve, you've experimented and you've seen times when that ROI is almost zero, even with Snapchat.
Yep.
And then there's times it's through the roof. And so just being cautious and careful as we talk about these things, because something that's really important to us is making sure products actually work for the customer, that the ROI is there, and that's a big deal.
Yep. And just to clear something up, if you're listening, we're talking about the geofilters on Snapchat, not Snap ads. They're two different things. The Snap ads are more targeted like a Facebook campaign, and it's not like a push. It's more of when you're going through your photos on Snapchat, whereas the geofilters are when you're taking a photo, and those are used with the geofence. So there are two different ways, and they charge you differently. For the geofilters, they charge you based on the area, and for the Snap ads, they charge you either based on impressions or swipe ups. So there's a little bit of a difference there.
And I appreciate you clarifying that, because it obviously my brain right away went over to the filters. But yes, There is different platforms, and most of the large companies, as you know, are looking at different ways of generating revenue in any way, shape, or form that they can. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the other bigger companies have geofencing capabilities. I do know that there are some geofencing technologies built in behind the scenes, like with Facebook. If you advertise with Facebook, you can say, hey, advertise to this specific area. Well, that's what's really going on. It's like a circle radius away from. It is geofencing. They're not saying that, but that's how they're really delivering that, is they know where you're at when your app's open. And so they'll show you ads that way. But when we have people come to us and say, I'm going to go geofence. And we're like, okay, well, tell us what that means to you. And so often what we find is that it really doesn't, it's not going to live up to what their expectations are, because it's not really going to drive the amount of impressions or engagement that they're hoping for.
Yeah, I think when you only go to a geofencing strategy, it's like putting up a very plasticky white picket fence that can blow over in the wind. You need something to support it, because it's not going to work otherwise. Because with with the geo targeting there, you're really focused on a small area, and if you're not paying a lot of money to bring that area out, and you're only focusing really around your store where there's not a lot of traffic already, and you're only targeting the people that already went there, you're probably not going to get new customers. So you do need some sort of strategy around it to support that. It's almost like retargeting ads. You can't retarget to no one. You need to have someone come to your website first. So you need something to push them there so that they become in that retargeting pool. I think a lot of geofencing needs that as well, because you need to get that pool of people. You need that traffic coming in to see the ads and to get excited about your new offer.
Yeah, great point. And that's exactly what the issue is. And we watch geofencing pretty closely, obviously experimenting with different things with it, watching what the big campaigns that we run with advertisers, with Facebook and so on, what they're doing behind the scenes. But at the same time, we've seen a lot of geofencing hasn't been that effective. And so we're the first to, we love technology and marketing, so we're the first ones to jump into it and say, let's test this and try it. But you know what? Like anything, it's fairly early in its stages. I think they're going to figure it out, and it'll get pretty exciting. If iPhone or Android said, yeah, we'll absolutely build it right in, where if somebody comes in, I can push to text to them, that'd be amazing. But keeping in mind that all your regulatory issues pop in. For example, with texting, they're going to have to make sure they double opt in, and you're going to have just all these different things that are going to happen. We'll figure it out, but it's interesting times. And geofencing is probably one of the misunderstood products out there.
Yeah, I think it is definitely the most misunderstood. We actually did another geofencing podcast a few weeks ago. If you want to listen to that one, it's more of a very broad approach to geofencing in general and just a few specific questions. And yeah, you can listen to that one as well. I think that's all I have on this topic. Chris, is there anything else you'd want to add before we hop off air?
No, I just, Steve, thank you. It's always exciting to talk to everybody, and hopefully people find some information. They're able to glean information out of this. We try to keep things simple, and we love if you share these podcasts with your friends and fellow marketers.
Yeah, please share the podcast, and feel free to subscribe on the RSS feed on the podcast itself. You can find it on iTunes, our website at puredriven.com/podcast, or on the Apple Play. So we will see you soon. Have
Thanks,
a good
Steve.
one.